Welcome. Hi there. This is Clifford Bates, and welcome once again to our readings, Machiavelli's Prince. We're wrapping up. We're going to be wrapping up next couple meetings. So today we're going to be doing chapter 24, which is the question of why the princes of Italy lost their kingdoms. This chapter is a short one, only 3 paragraphs. We're again reading from D'Alvarez's translation. The link is below. We start on page 143 of it. The link to the publisher information at Waveland. We start at page 143. He says, the title is Why the Princes of Italy Have Lost Their Kingdom. It starts, the things written above, observe prudently, make a new prince seem ancient, and immediately render him more secure and more firm in the state than if he had become ancient in it. In other words, the things he previously just discussed, which again, if we look at it, we take the older, battered copy of this, and we looked at what he said in those previous chapters, the previous one before this one, which was why the kings of Italy have lost their kingdoms, right? This is the chapter, sorry. In what modes flatterers are to be avoided, right? That's 23. 22 is who should they have secretaries, right? The question of the secretaries and advisors. And then 21 is about what they should be, what they should do to be esteemed, right? What they should do to be the question of esteem. And then last, 20 is the question that I think about on fortresses, and the question of fortresses and whether they're not. Again, we've been going here. Again, this is the question of who's prudent. Machiavelli is kind of assessing the reader's prudence, in that he has made various claims. Some of them he will assert you should do things. Then where else he said as well, don't do it. And there's contradictions. All through this is kind of very much a test of you understanding what he's trying to get at. And he said, if you've done everything right, you would, even though you're a modern prince, a new prince, right? You would seem ancient, and you would be more secure if doing all those things he's recommended, more secure than if you were indeed ancient. Okay, so that's the first sentence. Now, for the actions of a new prince, and therefore he's saying the actions of a new prince. But it's interesting. Remember why the princes of Italy lost their kingdom. Okay, he then instead of going right into the topic of why he goes into this thing about new princes, right? And let's pay attention. For the actions of a new prince, which are much more observed than those of a hereditary one. So therefore we pay more attention, semicolon. And when they are known to be virtuous, they much more do they pick up men, and much more than do they obligate them than does ancient blood. Now he makes a very claim here. He says that the new prince doing all these drastic deeds attract people to him much more than those who have ancient blood. In other words, the things that he does, that he's and therefore you get this idea. Now we have to remember that the ancient orders allow you perpetuation, okay, and even if you lose it, you can get it back quickly, as long as they haven't extinguished you, okay? He basically, remember, he said newer ones, he seems to be contradicting much of what he said earlier here at first glance. Because newer princes, he says, are more risky. It's innovating new things and doing this. He seems to be kind of really contradicting what he said earlier. So we should kind of check something out here, because something's up, right? He said, repeat, that, again, for the actions of a new prince are much more observed than those of a hereditary one. So the observation of them, right? They're noticeable, they're doable. Hereditary princes usually don't have to do those things. Remember, they have to do those things because they're new, okay? And when they're known to be virtuous, so therefore the question is that this new prince is known to be virtuous. Much more they pick up men, and much more do they obligate them than does ancient blood. Okay, so therefore, once people are known to be virtuous, the new prince is known to be virtuous, he's able to attract more people than that of ancient blood. So that's an interesting point. Next sentence: for men are more taken by the present things than by those of the past. Semicolon. And when they find the good in the present, comma, they enjoy that and seek for nothing more, semicolon. On the contrary, they will take up every defense for him when he himself is not found lacking in other things. Whoa. As long as that last clause is the killer. If he's not found lacking in other things. Like in other words, he has means, he has power, he has things like this. Of course they will follow you. But if in other words, if you're counting on them following you, then what? You don't have this last clause. In other words, you need what is it? Not lacking the other things. What are the other things? The other things are resources, thoughtful planning, good for. So it's not only being able to attract. If you're just relying on the people, your attractiveness, and this to deliver things. Well, no, you need the other resources. You need the soldiers. You need arms of your own. You need the judgment. You need the occasion. The right occasion, and these things. So let's look at this again. Let's look at that sentence one more time. In other words, he says that now he makes a thing that the people prefer the past to the present, and I think there is a truth for this. People forget about the good that you've done them. Remember, he says that people are fickle in that sense. People forget. They look at the present. They value the present more than the past. They haven't tasted the future yet. They have not experienced or tasted the benefit of the future. So therefore, promises don't deliver. They look at the present, and the problem with those who've done things on the past, the is, what have you done for me lately? Right? You've done all these good things before, but what are you doing for me lately? Is the kind of very much common phrase. So they look for the present, and therefore he says that this is the problem of hereditary rule in a sense. The hereditary ruler who just relies on his hereditary, and actually that is why he's risking. He's risking. Now, going back to all the way to chapter 2, where he says that, well, even if you do lose it, the mere occasion will allow them to get it back again, right? But again, it can still again be taken away from him, but at a much higher price. But it can still be done against him, and particularly if he's eliminated, if the person who takes over just eliminates the line. Okay, remember he's talking about this all the time. But even then, if the line is well loved, remember the story about the people killed the family, but then except for the young baby, and they found a cousin far away of that blood to become temporary prince until the baby was achieved maturity to take the prince. Again, we have to understand Machiavelli is saying that he's not merely, he's given a lot of cases where hereditary origins have better. Now, he's making a claim that, well, a new prince who's virtuous and he's done all these other things, he's much more able to attract people, okay, than ancient blood. And that is because why? Unless the ancient blood is keep on doing things to get if the ancient prince is smart and is constantly keeping doing as much as he can, he's a prudent prince, and he's doing everything to kind of perpetuate his rule properly, and prevent any shortcomings. But even then, he should have an easier time than even if he's imperfect, even if he's just ordinary. Remember that line. Let's go back to the thing, the ordinary print, all the way back. That even if it was ordinary, he would get it back, right? He has to do something extraordinary to lose it. So let's continue here. And so he will have a double glory, the beginning of a new principate, and of organizing and strengthening it with good laws, good arms, and good examples, semicolon. As that one will have double shame who, having been born a prince, has lost the principate by his little prudence. Okay, so therefore notice that the point here is prudence. In other words, the new prince who is successful and gives his thing what? Notice this. He strengthens it, his realm. In other words, he's beginning of a new principle and ornating it and strengthening it, with good laws, good arms, and good examples. 3. And notice, good arms and good laws, that takes us back to the whole discussion. Remember, he hasn't not really given us an direct account of laws, but then he has, indirectly. Okay? He has, because by talking about the ordinance of arms and the ordinance of the all different mechanisms of ordinances, he's by implication talking about laws and the good laws that are necessary. Because remember the argument, you can't have, without good laws you cannot have good arms, and without good arms, good laws mean nothing. And therefore, you need these. Therefore, good laws and good arms must be connected. Must be connected by definition. In other words, if you have bad laws, you don't have good laws, you're not going to have good arms. Okay, so good laws, good arms, good arms, good laws without good arms won't be. Those laws won't last long. Okay, so therefore, this is the logic of this. And the third thing is what? Examples, good examples. Now, good here is, what does he mean? Does he mean moral examples? No, he means good as in the examples that everyone that what attracts, examples that everyone thinks at and look at with awe and reverence. People will look at it like they'll be satisfied and stupefied. Again, using that phrase, they will be their minds will be. Their minds will be captured by these things. Some good examples. And then he says what? And that ends the first paragraph, right? Because those two things are examples of what prudence means. Prudence means the ability, knowing how to bring about good laws, good arms, and good examples, and knowing how to make sure other people achieve it, right? And then whereas the shame of a hereditary prince is by what it says, even though born a prince, has lost the principate by his lack of prudence. Okay, so one thing is creating new orders, but also ordinating them so that they're established well. That's the double glory here. So next paragraph, the second paragraph, the middle paragraph here. And if one will consider those lords in Italy who have lost their state in our times, such as the King of Naples and the Duke of Milan, and others, one will find in them first a common defect as to arms, for the causes which have been discussed at length, semicolon. Moreover, one will see that some of them either made the people enemies or, if they made the people friends, they did not know how to secure themselves against the great, because without these defects, states are not lost that have enough nerve to take an army into the field, period. Now, there's some things here, nerve, a sense of vigor, prize. Nerve is a very interesting thing. Vigor, enough vigor, prize, whatever. A field, that is the chapter 10 again, the question of chapter 10, that you always don't postpone a war. You should be able to always take it to should always be able to make an army together and bring it to the field and have a day of it, right? In other words, he makes this point that, but his example of the two, King of Naples and the Duke of Milan, right? That again is the King of Naples is Frederick of Aragon, whose kingdom was taken by Ferdinand of Spain, and Louis the 12th of France. In other words, Ferdinand in Spain. First Louis took it, and then Ferdinand take it, right? Then what happens is Ludovico Sforza. Against chapter. He's talked about chapter 3. And therefore, that's a very interesting aspect of here. Remember, Sforza in his castle doesn't trust the people. And his example here is that what? That they made, that they either did two, it goes that those two examples. So therefore, he goes, it is the second paragraph that we get into the topic of, it is in the second paragraph that the theme of the title of the chapters are being addressed, not the first. The first paragraph is about the prudence of the prince, and the need as to the prudence and good judgment, which seems to have echoes everything that's been said before. So is it a transition? Now, here we get into the question of how the princes lost their kingdoms, and princes they lose it because what? They didn't follow the certain things, the common defects. That is, they didn't trust the people. They built they built a fortress rather than trusting the people. They made the enemy of the people, or they made enemy of the great, and they weren't able to handle it. Okay. Again, these are the common aspects of this. And they weren't able to put an army into the field, right? They weren't able to, because they lacked nerve. In other words, he says, though against the great, because without these defects, great states are not lost, even though they have are not lost that have enough nerve to take an army into the field. So if they have enough army to take into the field, they won't be lost. It's if they have enough nerve. So loss of nerve, however, means they could be lost. But it's you've either made the enemy of the people or enemy of the great, and not dealt with the great. Let's look at the next sentence here. He goes, Philip of Macedon, not the father of Alexander, but the one who was conquered by Titus Quintus, did not have much state when compared to the greatness of the Romans, and of Greece who were attacking him. Nevertheless, by being a military man, and one who knew how to keep and provide for the people and to secure himself against the great, he for many years sustained a war against them, and if in the end he lost the dominion of some cities, the kingdom nevertheless remained his. Now this is he's talking about here the king of Macedonia, Philip the V. Okay, Philip V of Macedonia, between 237 to 173 BC. The king, he was king of Macedonia 221 to 179. He was defeated by the consul Quintus Famius at this is at footnote 5 in Dialvers at 145. Cledo Sevene in 179. Titus Quintus, noted for his Pan-Hellenism, proclaimed the freedom of the Greeks at the Islenian Games in 196. He was hailed by the Greek cities as their deliverers. For Philip and Quintus, Titus Quintus Flavius, you can see more about them. These in discourses. Sorry, I'm being attacked by a moth. Discourses, book 2 of Discourses, chapter 4, and book 3 of Discourses, chapter 10. On Philip, book 3, specifically about Philip on his own, Discourses, book 3, chapter 37. So again, we left with the example of he talks about He was great. He is able to maintain his kingdom, no matter what. Even though the Romans were able to kind of take some cities from him, he was what? He was, as he says here, he being a military man who knew how to provide for the people, and to secure themselves against the great. He was able to sustain a war for many years. And if in the end he lost the dominion of some cities, right? The kingdom he kept the kingdom. Next paragraph, the final paragraph of this chapter. Therefore, let our princes who have been in their principate for many years, and then lost it, not accuse fortune, but their own indolence, semicolon. For never having in quiet times thought that the times could change, open bracket, for not to take account of the tempest during calms is the common defect of men, close bracket, comma. Then when adverse times came, they thought only of fleeing and never of defending themselves, semicolon. And they hoped that the people, comma, tiring of the insolence of the conquerors, would call them back. Okay, period. In other words, again, remember that he said earlier, in other words, Prince, he goes all the way of the idea that hereditary princes always can come back because of people, loyalty to people. People remend them, and the people get sick of in other words, and he says a prince who relies on that is being lazy. If that is his only defense, relying on the people's getting tired of the conquerors and eventually wanting you back, okay, that's not a defense. They'd rather flee and hope that the people will eventually tire of the conqueror and welcome you back. Okay, this is not Machiavelli is saying this is not the good strategy. The better strategy was to during the good times prepare yourself to be able to prevent the bad times. In other words, not to take account of the tempest during the calm is a common defect of men. People don't think of the bad times. They don't prepare for the bad times. In other words, they should always. If you prepare for the bad times, you're able to. When you're in the good times, when things are good and prosperous, you should prepare for the bad times. But we don't do that. We think of the now. We live in the present again. Remember, he said it's the present. We don't think of the future. We don't respect the past, and we don't think of the future. We live in the present, and this is the danger here. And that in other words, the princes who their laziness would simply would waiting for the insolence of the conquerors would call them back. That is true that this will happen, but that is a bad strategy, he's saying. Okay, now next sentence. Such a remedy, when others are lacking, is good, but it is very bad indeed to have to let go other remedies for this one. For one should never fall believing that someone will will be found to pick you up. Now, the you here is an interesting one. This is the second person familiar here. He's going to the familiar here. In other words, you shouldn't rely. In other words, he's saying, if let me read that sentence. It's a good sentence. Such a remedy, when others are lacking, is okay, good. If you didn't, in other words, if that was the only thing, it was good. But it is very bad indeed to have to let go other remedies for this one. In other words, not to prepare. If you had the opportunity and the ability to make other remedies, and that you don't use them and don't choose this one, only this one, that is bad. That's a lack of judgment. This is not good. In other words, and this is bad. For one should never fall believing that someone will be found to pick you up. In other words, you're gonna, you should never fall that you're going to rely on others to pick you up. Again, this is the idea he's constantly talked about here. Relying on others. Those who rely on others is like to rely on fortune, to rely on others, and is not to rely on yourself. To rely on mercenaries and other armies is dangerous, right? Because it's yours. You must rely on you, your armors, your arms, your resources. To rely on others, to emphasize on luck rather than your virtue, again, is to rely on others. To rely on fortune, luck, or things outside of your ability is to rely on others. And this is a defect of the prince for Machiavelli, in a sense. That it is a defense of any man, in that sense, to rely on others. In other words, he ends that sentence of that it is one should never fall believing someone will be found to pick you up. Remember that you there is he's talking very intimately to the reader in that sense. That next sentence that either does not happen, or if it does, it is not to your security, because such a defense is based and does not depend on you. In other words, it does not. Such a defense relies on others. Does not. It is base. Again, this is another thing. Assumption. To rely on others is base. Base. What does base mean? It means bad. It means unvirtuous. Base means the disgusting. It's low, unmanly, virtuous, virtue, manly. It's not a thing what a man would do. It is not something that a virtuous person, a person who should be looked up to, would do. To this kind of relying on others is something the vulgar and the weak do. You should rely on yourself. You should pull yourself up in that sense. And this is that point. This is why it's neither does it. First, he's saying that others will not. First of all, there won't be others. If you're going to count on others, it's not going to happen. You're relying on them. You should rely on yourself. Prepare the means for you to do it. Create the opportunities. And if it does, he says, even if it does have the other person helps you, that's not your security, because they've done it and they'll remember it, and they will take them. They will make the most of it by helping you. They will expect you to reward them, and that may actually harm your rule in that sense. And the last sentence of the thing. And only those defenses are good, are certain, are durable, which depend upon you yourself and your virtue. Notice, the only defenses that are what? Good, are certain, and are durable, depend upon you yourself and your virtue. And by virtue means the character, your ability to make your judgment, your virtue. The biggest virtue here is having nerve, being confident. In other words, first of all, your most important virtue is prudence, having good judgment. Okay, being able to have the mind to understand things, to understand what is advantageous and what's not advantageous, what is beneficial and what's not beneficial, and to understand the difference between the seeming of things and the being of things. And the other virtue is being resolute, being courageous, being resolute, and making your decisions, changing your mind. Another important thing is mastering your resources, right? Being frugal and being a good steward of your resources and the resources of your state. All of these other virtues that he's talking about. Again, back to chapter 15. Remember, chapter 15 talked about those qualities. Well, the virtues are the ones those things that will deliver you your state. The things that will give you praise and the things that will earn you blame, right? But here he talks about the virtue, and he's more concrete than that. The virtues are those things which not only they will help you keep your state. They were the instruments of your judgment, your ability to marshal your resources. Again, that's connected with judgment itself. Your ability to effectively know how to keep your image, and not do the things that will make you hated or held in contempt. And this ends this things. In other words, the best defenses are those that are good, certain, and durable, are the ones that you control, that depend upon you, your decisions and your virtue. So again, if you have any questions, please below. There's comments. You can fill comment in. I see that we have not many. We get about 10 or 15. I haven't been advertising this well, but maybe other people will send things. And I mean, these are forever. So, maybe you're not reading it right now. Currently, you're maybe seeing this some other time in the future. I will, if I see a comment, I will reply for it. So don't think only this week today. He doesn't. I don't answer today or tomorrow. He's never going to read it. No, I read it. Okay. And I will reply. If you have like this, please like it. If you want to see more, well, please share it with a friend. Right, any kind of form of social media you want to use. You can follow me on social media below. Yeah, okay. I've been looking at Twitter lately, and goofing around. I often get banned on Facebook for 20 when I say something stupid. I'll say something stupid once in a while. Well, you're 3 days punished because I said something that happened twice in this year. I have to maybe be good for a while again and be more circumspect. You can follow that. Subscribe if you want to see more of this, and take care. And I will hope to see you again. Bye bye.